Hi, my name is Jamie Tomey, and I am pleased to welcome you to the Evanston Bound Quarantour series, brought to you by Artist Book House. Each week we get to talk to some amazing book artists and writers, letterpress printers, and paper makers. It's such a good time. I hope you enjoy this episode. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Quarantour, brought to you by Artist Book House. I'm Jamie Tomey, and I'm so excited today to be joined here by Landis Blair. I am really happy to have him here because I have a copy of his book here. And I just want to read this quick bio. Landis Blair is the author and illustrator of The Envious Siblings and Other Morbid Nursery Rhymes, as well as the illustrator of the New York Times bestseller From Here to Eternity and the graphic novel The Hunting Accident, which won Best in Adult Books at the Excellence in Graphic Literature Awards.
Whoa.
He has published illustrations in numerous print and online periodicals, including The New Yorker, The New York Times, Chicago Magazine, VQR, and Medium. He lives in Chicago. Landis, welcome. How are you today?
I am doing well. How are you all doing? Thanks for having me here.
Thank you for being here. I am doing okay. Usually when we start these, we start with the question, how did you become a book artist? Or how did you become a librarian? How did you become a writer? Because you have also writing and illustration and artistry, I don't know how to ask you that. So I'm just going to start with, how did you become an illustrator, writer, artist, awesome person, guy?
Well, I suppose those are all they are all connected for me, but it comes back to drawing. I didn't think of myself as a writer until much later. I don't even still kind of think of myself as a writer, but at some point, I went to art school and was thinking I'd go into the more academic route, and I was planning on getting an MFA and maybe teaching, or I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, but then things don't. That was my first big lesson, and things don't go as you planned. And so I ended up after school working at, I didn't get into any MFAs, and so I worked at a gallery for a good while, and then that shut down during the recession.
Oh no.
but that ended up being the best thing that could happen, because that's when I really returned back to drawing every day and painting. And over the course of then a few years, I had never taken any illustration classes or anything, but I had a good friend who suggested I try illustration, and so I just kind of started doing that on the side. But then more than anything, what got me into kind of doing maybe what you would call book creation, and then also with the writing, is that I intensely fell in love with Edward Gorey during that. I had known who he was. I first saw his work much later when I was in high school, and that's kind of a different story, because it was I felt kind of guilty for liking the things that it felt very transgressive from the upbringing I had. But then during this period of kind of unemployment and rediscovering kind of drawing, I was having a conversation with a good friend, and I was kind of pitying myself and saying, I was talking about Edward Gorey and saying, I wish I could have done something like this. I was, this was probably 10, 15 years ago, I don't know. And the friend just basically called my bluff and said, well, why don't you just make one yourself? Make a story. And so I tried. And so I spent several months kind of writing and illustrating my version of an Edward Gorey story. And then I, self-published it, and I had so much fun that I kept doing more and more of those. And eventually that's what got me, because at some point then I started showing I tried showing at a comic convention with these little books.
Sorry. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I thought, sorry.
wasn't, I was trying to, I was trying to coordinate e-learning as well
Oh,
as.
oh,
Go ahead with that. So you had self-published and then you were working on making the next one, right? Is that what you said?
yeah, but
Yeah.
I took them to a comic convention to try to start selling them, but I don't think I even broke even at the convention with the table. But through that first large convention I did, I ended up getting a call for or an email for a job interview for illustrating a graphic novel, and
It went from there.
yeah, like so 3 months later I ended up, or 4 months later I got the job, which I didn't think there was any possibility I'd get this job, and then that turned into it was supposed to be a 6-month project. It turned into 3 years, and that, things then have kind of but I've still enjoyed creating my own books. So that was different, illustrating that for working with a writer, and I mean very intensely for several years on this project. And then after that project, I ended up illustrating a nonfiction book for somebody, so doing 45 spot illustrations, and then eventually I was able to, an editor was interested in one of these small self-published books that I was doing and said, I want a whole book of those. And that's what turned into the Envious Siblings and Other Morbid Nursery Rhymes. So
Yeah.
So
Cool. What was the first story that was that little self-published book that grew into this? Can you just give us a secret? Tell us the secret.
It was called the Regressive Problem, and I still have a copy. I mean, I've reprinted it, but it's and I realize now it sounds like a political title, but it was not a political reference at all. But it was inspired by, at the time I had some cats, 2 cats, and one of them was having incontinence issues.
Yeah.
And it was basically a thought experiment. I mean, I had a moment of just the amount of frustration of you loving this cat so much, and yet no matter what we did, she still was, peeing on the carpet, and we did all sorts of things. And it just, there was a moment after several months of this that I like something in my head clicked about, oh, this makes sense why you hear these awful stories about people abandoning pets, and it immediately I thought, no, I could never do that, but it kind of led me thinking. And so I wrote this little story about a cat who had the same problem, and then but the owners take a different path, and so it doesn't end well for the cat, but so that was kind of my first foray into trying to do something Edward Gorey-esque. And then a few years later, I should say, I did a sequel to that book called The Regressive Solution, and the cat's already dead at the beginning, but it's still the cat kind of has some level of justice returned to it, that somebody finds the cat on the side of the road, and that's kind of a different, it's still a sad story, but it's happier.
Can people find these on your website? Or did you sell out of them? They can find them on your.
You can read them for free. I mean, I don't have all of the old books on the website, but there's a number of kind of these short stories that you could read for free on my website, or I do have copies of them, of some of them left in my online store, but
I love.
Both of the cat ones are on the website though, so
you can read those there. That's exciting. So the person just saw the cat story and was like, I love this, let's make more. And then how long from that point did this book, because this came out last year, right? 2019?
Yeah, last October.
Yeah, which is a perfect time for it, October. How long did it take, the process for you from that initial, hey, we want to do this, to when it was published? How long was that process? And then, so I ask layered questions. Everybody who watches these knows I go crazy, but I guess the other question is, did you write the rhymes first and come up with the illustrations, or how does that process work with this book in particular? So how long? And what's the process?
Well, the this the Envious Siblings, that book actually wasn't, the editor didn't see the story about the cat. It was a number of books later. There, I had done one nursery rhyme called The Envious Siblings, and so I'd done that just for fun, and I gave it to a bunch of people, and the editor saw it.
Gotcha.
And so from the point that he saw, I mean, at that point I was working with an agent, and so he then was talking to the agent, and so from that point, when he first said, no, I want a whole book of these, I think that's probably about 2.5 years later that the book came out.
Okay.
I mean, I could be wrong about that. I mean, much longer than it feels like it should be, but
But the exact amount of time that it is, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
But as far as the writing and the illustration for the nursery rhymes, it definitely was doing the writing first. I mean, most of the time I do the writing first, but with the nursery rhymes, I mean, it was kind of a different process from me doing my own self-published books, which I loved doing, to instead trying to pitch those kind of stories to an editor, because basically when they decided, okay, we want a whole collection of them, they wanted to have 8 of these in one book, and we had the first one that he wanted things like it, and so it was I found it to be really difficult, challenging, because it completely changed my process. Whereas whenever I've done my own little stories, there's some spark, like with the cat, that I have like kind of this one moment of emotion of there's something really powerful here, and I want to explore that. I don't really know how it's going to go, but when I start writing, it's kind of, I know that there's a story there. I just have to find it. And so the difference that I found, or the difficulty I found with working with the editor, while they made it ultimately much better than I ever could have made it, I was pitching, 7 kind of one sentence synopsis that I knew I could make into a story, and that there was a connection, and a number, I had to keep coming up with new ones, because even though in my head, I knew I could make this, but I didn't know quite how. I had to sell it to that, and that was a very different process to me, and frustrating at times, but it ultimately ended up producing a much better book. So
yeah, so the idea of you couldn't just immediately jump into making it from that one sentence thing. You had to check and talk, workshop, talk around it, think about it, and sort of defend it, maybe.
Yeah, and along the way, there was writing nursery rhymes that in various versions of them, editing them and changing them, and then a few months later having them scrapped, and him saying, this one really isn't working, I think you should write a new one. It's just so like going through that, it felt brutal, but it was, I needed it in order to make a better book.
A stronger. Yeah. Well, it is a great book, and I encourage everybody to find it and either own it or get it from your library, whatever. It's very funny and also creepy, which is exactly what you want right now, right? How about we start your slideshow, Ken? Yeah, let's do that, and we'll talk through the slideshow. And so that gives everybody the, I'm going to actually, let's keep you spotlighted so that you're the little person off to the side when Ken gets your show started. And then people, if you have questions, of course, drop them into the chat, and we will interrupt wildly as we move forward with this. So tell us about the Envious Siblings. You already kind of did. So here's the cover. And this background right here, I just want to mention, this is the end papers. Did you draw all of those as one thing, or were the individual things that they put together in production?
No, I drew them all. I should say I drew the frame, and then I drew all the vignettes. Actually, you can probably see it behind me. That there's you can see a pattern there with white dots. So that's the whole pattern. But then I left the vignettes blank, and then I drew all the vignettes on a separate sheet of paper so that I could rearrange them. So that I didn't. So then I spent a lot of time digitally kind of trying to figure out which order to put them in, but I did draw them all.
I love that. All right.
But then if you go to the next slide, that it'll show, these are the 8 kind of title pages of, or it's just the 8 stories that are inside the book. And so the one, the Envious Siblings in the lower left, that's the one I had done a few years before that, just for fun on my own. And the others are all kind of grew out of that. But I think we're going to play, I had a good friend who narrated one of these stories, Honorable Beast, the one on the lower right. And so I think we're going to play that with a little bit of animation showing or we just kind of panning over the illustrations.
Hester, said Mother, you're being a pest. Go elsewhere till dinner and give me a rest. I hate you, screamed Hester from deep in her chest, before stomping off at this hurtful request. While crying with anger and some indignation, bemoaning her mother's imposed segregation, she saw out her window with deep agitation a tiger appearing without explanation. "Hello," said the tiger, "please join me outside." Poor Hester just stared with her mouth open wide, while pondering deeply before she replied. "I thank you," she said, "but I'm too terrified." "Tut, tut," said the tiger, "your fear I can see, and tigers are fierce, but I do guarantee your safety and merriment, if you agree to come to my lair and have dinner with me." "Oh my," Hester said, "it sounds lovely, but no, my mother won't like it and won't let me go." "I see," said the tiger, "but I'm not your foe, and you're not my only friend coming, you know." "Hello," said a bear, "I am charmed to be sure, and dinner with you has a special allure. With you as our guest we will put on our furs. What a night we will have, what a feast will occur." Then Hester let out a most pitiful sigh. "My mother will yell at me until I cry, for she's making dinner expecting me nigh." "Pish posh," said the tiger, "just look who's nearby." "Hello," said a gator, "how sumptuous you seem, and you at our table, oh my, what a dream. I'm so excited I almost could scream," he said with a smile and teeth all agleam. "How tempting," said Hester, "to join in your feast, but if you knew Mother, your welcome would cease. She'd call you all wretched, dishonorable beasts, and keep me inside for a year at the least." "How sad," said the gator, "your mother sounds horrid." "And," said the bear, "her judgment's distorted." "But," said the gator, "you will be supported, for joining with us will ensure she is thwarted." "It seems," said the tiger, "that I missed my cue. In my excitement I failed to tell you. Your mother will be at our fine dinner too." And the bear and the gator responded, "It's true." Then Hester cried out an ecstatic whoopee, and promptly climbed out of her window with glee. "This changes everything. Now I am free to make very merry with mother and thee." And what a fine picture the 4 of them made! They danced and they sang as they marched through the glade. They strutted and rollicked and never once strayed en route to the lair in their beastly parade. "At last," said the tiger, "now do step inside. Discover what gaiety we can provide." "Hurrah!" said the gator. "And how?" Bear replied, and Hester with gratitude promptly complied. And lo, how the feast was displayed with great flair, the best decorations, the best silverware, and true to their word, Hester's mother was there. Prepared on the table plump and cooked rare.
These are just a couple more illustrations from some of the other stories. So this is from a story called My Suspicious Sister, and it's the concept is that this little girl, her parents keep telling her that this is her sister, but it's a skeleton on puppet strings, and so she follows around and she gets more and more suspicious, but it has a darker turn at the end. So.
It's at the end, which is very satisfying once you get there. It's very dark, very satisfying.
So yeah, so if you can go to the next couple, then we can. Yeah, so this is another.
Toya, your partner in crime for Verses and Vignettes for next month, by the way, everyone. She says, love this story, Landis. It made me think about dating when I read it. And that's the opening story in the book, right? I think the opening playground one, if I remember right. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And then I have the table of contents right here, but yeah, Honorable Beast is kind of in the middle. Yeah. Go ahead.
This is a story called Dance Macabre, and it's about bugs finding a corpse and dancing on it and having a party because they're so excited.
That's what bugs
do.
So when you are drawing, is this ink on what kind of paper?
Yes, ink on Bristol board, and or various. I mean, depending on the quality. If for this is something that's going to be for a book or more serious, I'll work on Bristol board. But if it's just kind of a quicker drawing, or I'm not as worried about it, I'll just do it on cardstock or something.
Yeah. But it's an ink pen or a marker or some sort of, what kind of tools do you use?
These were done mostly with just microns, although the first story, The Envious Siblings, the title story, that one, actually I was with a dip pen. And I enjoy using, yeah. But I get so frustrated with the amount of time you have to keep the nib clean, and then also, given the amount of cross hatching I do, I just get tired of dipping the pen over and over again.
Yeah.
So the technical pens are a saving grace. I mean, for a long time I used fountain pens to kind of as a mid ground between those two, and that had benefits in its own disadvantages. But I mean, it ultimately doesn't matter what you do. I mean, what you use, you can make anything work if you need to. So
yeah, I love that. Let's move on then. Oh, I love this story. I think I can't decide. I was just gonna say I think my favorite story, but then I'm like, no, I think the playground one is particularly awesome. But I can't decide which one is my favorite. So why don't you talk about this one? Because of course this led into the whole thing.
Yeah, this was from the first. So this is from the Envious Siblings, and it's a very simple story that each page, these two sisters, they keep envying different body parts of each other, and then they do something awful with it, and they remove it. And so I think this one it's like Angie envied Abby's eye, plucked it out, and bounced it high. And so, but as the story goes on, they still, they're missing limbs and missing eyeballs and feet and
teeth, lips. Yeah. Yeah, it's rather, again, very creepy and funny at the same time, which is exactly perfect.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. What's the next one?
one, yeah.
Again, my favorite story. And one of the reasons why this one's my favorite is that this one is just imagery and
Yeah.
story step by step through the pages, but also just the little girl. Talk about this one. Yeah.
Yeah, this story, I think, more than, I mean, while I'm grateful to the editor, this is this is the only one that doesn't have text in the book, but it's a silent nursery rhyme. But I had written a rhyme for it, and I liked the rhyme, but when I was talking with the editor about it, at some point he said, you know what, I don't think this needs the text. You can tell the story just as effectively, if not more, with just the illustrations. And I started thinking about it, and I realized he was right. And so, I mean, so I had to change some with the story. It had to add more illustrations to make some things clear. But it's the concept of the story is just that this girl, she gets separated from her mother in the subway station, and she's trying to find her mom. So she gets on a train thinking her mom got on the train, and every stop that she's sitting there on the subway, another monster comes onto the train and it eats a passenger.
Yeah.
And nobody else on the train is aware of them, seems to be aware of the monsters. The girl's the only one that can see them, and there's fewer and fewer passengers until she's the last one left at the end. And there's something to me about this story that, at least for myself, kind of reflects some visceral memories of being a child, of how it doesn't seem like adults are kind of paying attention. I guess with the story, it can work either way. I mean, you could read the story as this is just in the girl's imagination, and grown-ups are monsters. And I mean, when you're a child, someone who's a stranger is scary. But I think that's why this story kind of appeals to me, or the idea appealed to me so much, is that it really doesn't matter if the monsters are real or not, because they're real to the girl. So
Right. And she ends up being alone with them on the train, and it also talks about that sort of fear of being lost in a way. I think the idea of losing your mom in the subway, and go ahead. What were you gonna say? I think we're both like, yeah.
That's exactly the fear. Well, in the and I suppose there's an added level to that of, at the beginning of the story, you could say it's her fault. It's not her fault that she gets separated from mom. Like, she sneaks off because her mom's buying the ticket, and she kind of creeps under the turnstile, and then there's kind of that. Maybe this is my upbringing coming out to the like feeling like there has to be these drastic consequences for breaching the rules or something.
Yeah. This is the second time you've brought up your upbringing. What was that upbringing?
I grew up in. I mean, what I learned much later.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm happy to. I've since learned as an adult that it was fundamentalist Christian household, but I didn't think of it that way growing up. But just essentially extremely conservative Christian evangelical household, and so everything was. It was extremely sheltered upbringing. I went to a Christian school from second grade through 12th grade, and then I went to a Christian college to start with, and so we didn't have any media intake was highly filtered, and we didn't have a television, and so if I went over to a friend's house, the first thing my mom would ask coming back is, "What did you watch?" It's like there was not only God was watching, my parents were watching, and so anything that was remotely close to or perceived as close to unwholesomeness or sinfulness, I suppose you could say, is how they phrased it. But and that's why when I said that about Edward Gorey, when I first encountered him, it was a feeling of guilt, in that I was I think a junior in high school, and I was browsing at a Barnes and Noble for a gift for a friend, and I found one of the Amphigory treasuries, and I was blown away by this this book, and I knew my friend who had kind of morbid interest that he would like this. And so I brought it home, but before I wrapped it, I was spending all this time reading it, all the stories, and then I started getting more and more uneasy
Yeah.
with this. I read the stories, and then I got to this one story that was called The Disrespectful Summons, and it's essentially kind of an Edward Gorey version of, it's a woman who sort of sells her soul to the devil. And there's one panel in this, after she's had this conversation with the devil, and she's looking in a full-length mirror, and you see her from behind. You can't see anything, but you can tell that she's got her kind of dress or nightgown draped down, and her chest is bare, and she's looking in a mirror, and the text is something like, and she saw his mark upon her breast. And when I saw that page, I felt so guilty, because it was combining sexuality and the devil, and so I felt so guilty that I went and I brought the book to my father, and I confessed to it. Like I showed him the
I
book.
bought this for my friend. I feel so bad. Look at this book that's so evil. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
what did your dad say?
He I mean, he was glad that I showed him, but like he was diplomatic in the sense, like, said, well, you can give this to him, if from an artistic perspective, like if you feel like, but then he said, but you have to make that decision. And so I felt so
no.
I felt so guilty that I returned the book to the Barnes and Noble.
I was asking how old you were. So I think you said you were a junior, so you were like 16, 17?
Yeah, 16 or 17.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I knew about Gorey since then, and then as I got into college, I started looking at him more and appreciating it. But it wasn't until then, a few years after college, that I really kind of delved in. And at that point, so ultimately, that was in the same period, like 5-year span, when I was coming to grips with what I actually believed and realized that I wasn't at all a Christian. And I mean, it was a piece of that extricating myself from that way I grew up. So
yeah, so you used Edward Gorey to help you figure out what your true self beliefs were, and just in general, I think it feels like Edward Gorey was your funnel, sort of.
He was definitely one piece of that puzzle. I mean, there was obviously a bunch of things, but
yeah, of course.
I think with Edward Gorey, maybe it was because I couldn't deny how much I was attracted to these illustrations and these stories, and I didn't know why. And I think that was kind of what was it fascinated me and kind of pulled me in even more. So
yeah, that's great. What do we have next on the slides? Because I can go on to more questions after Edward Gorey, because I have some, but let's go through. Oh, yes. Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Wait, the screen didn't change on my side. What's the image up? Sorry. Oh, there it is. Oh, okay. So this is at the end of the story, Malicious Playground, and so after this is one of the last pages, but the kids have kind of had a brutal game of torture, almost, I guess you could say, on the playground, and then at the end they come inside to play with Dad, and so that's kind of the
yeah
the image. But I think that image itself encapsulates the book maybe better than like the entire book in one image, just because it's children are they're pretty brutal. I mean, there's no they haven't learned how to kind of cover up their basest instincts, and so I mean, I know that's just one perspective. That also brings unparalleled joy and kind of in other avenues. But I think that that with this book especially, or more, kids can handle morbid humor. I mean, like one of the, I mean, I've talked about this with many people, but the Heinrich Kaufmann's morbid nursery rhymes from the 1700s or 1800s, the Strohveil Pater, and that
and
those
help.
are one of the best-selling children's books of all time.
Yeah.
It's like kids can handle it. I feel like it's the parents typically who freak out about
Right.
how this is, because I think it's not giving children the credit of figuring out that this is not actually, that they can find humor in it without actually acting on it, that they might understand those inclinations, but they realize that it's an exaggeration of what a normal person would actually.
Right. And Maria, Maria Burke is on here, and she's a librarian. So Maria, would you look up the publication date of that book? And also, so just so we know, just to let us know, we had talked a couple weeks ago with Andrea Dezo on her Quarantour, and she was kind of talking about the Grimm's fairy tales and how they had been so distilled over the years that when she illustrated them, they went back to the very, very original, and they were so dark.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same point, right? The idea of children, or younger people, being able to handle more than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
Places.
Yeah.
There's a question that popped up in the chat that's an anonymous question. How do your parents handle your writing now and handle your now?
They are. I mean, I love them dearly, and they are very quick to say they're proud of me, which makes me happy, and yet at the same time they don't. I mean, we've come to
A daytime.
like there's some level of peace agreement between us, where I know they don't agree with a lot of the topics my artwork engages with, because so much of my work has to do with death. I mean, even the more serious work that so my mom will make comments, but they're not. For the most part, but yeah, they say that they're proud of me, and they focus on the things that don't strictly have to do with death. So
Right. I love that. And actually, I just noticed that Maria, the librarian, had to leave the Zoom for a few minutes, but now she's back. So can you give her the name of the book that we want her to look up the publication date for?
Heinrich Hoffmann's Struwwelpeter.
Yeah. Maria, if you're on, could you look up the information about that book and drop it into the chat for us? Because we're just curious, and I can't Google it right now. So thank you. All right, do we have more slides?
Yeah, but you can go as fast or slow. I just put some more examples of other kind of illustration books.
Oh, this hunting accident, which you illustrated as well.
Yeah, so this is that graphic novel that it was about 3 years of working on. So these are some of the pages from that book, and if you go to the next illustration too, then you can see a full 2-page
spread.
Yeah. So this is a nonfiction, or based on a true story, Chicago crime story. But the main character is a blind man who is sent to Stateville Prison in Joliet, Illinois, and his cellmate ended up being Nathan Leopold of Leopold and Loeb, the thrill killers. And so it's a story about the blind man and his friendship with this murderer who ends up basically saving his life and prevents him from committing suicide. So, but these are the kinds of illustrations. I mean, these are obviously the more kind of spreads, but there's definitely a bunch of pages of just panels and things. But this is a 2-page spread inside the book.
So Maria has found the book, Heinrich Hoffmann's Der Struffelweber, I can't pronounce it. And she says, Shock-Headed Peter, or Shaggy Peter, is an 1845 German children's book. And then, so Katie also asked, thank you, Maria, for looking that up. You're a resident librarian. Katie also asks, how long does an image like this take to make?
I mean, this one took a particularly long time. You mean strictly from the the hatching itself, but there's a lot of shame in this drawing too. That, well, I mean, I still see all the flaws in this right now, but this is the third version. I mean, fortunately, I didn't get too far in that. I did one in pencil the first, and I just realized it was completely wrong with the perspective. So I did it again, and I started inking that one, and then I realized I had messed something else up in that one, and so I had to start it a third time. And so this one, I think total, because of those mistakes, from pencil drawing to finished, on this one's probably like a week and a half or something.
Wow.
Of kind of full-time work, but
Well,
most of the pages in that graphic novel, you're not taking into account the pencil drawing and the sketches, which was definitely a lot of time. But as far as when I was inking them at the end, it would basically be one full day of inking, like the full work day, and that would be one page after I already had the pencil drawing and everything done. So
yeah. Katie's also mentioning wonderful. So you're saying, okay, so you start with the sketches and then you work back and forth with the author and say, here are my sketches, and they approve whatever. And then on the pencil drawing, are you layering over the pencil? And are the pencil drawings as detailed as these?
no, they're definitely not as, I mean, yeah, so this is on top of the pencil drawing, but I have other illustrator friends that have teased me in the past, in that they say that I make coloring book pages for myself. And so when I say, I have a lot of comic book artist friends, and I'm blown away at how well they can draw. And when you see their pencil drawings, they're so realized, and they put in all the tones and the values, and they're making like a guide for them for inking. And I don't know why I ended up doing this, but this is how I work on everything. Is I mean, I do the pencil drawing, but then I go over top of it. I basically outline the pencil drawing with that one, kind of single outline, then erase the pencil, and then go in and I just start moving through with the cross hatching.
Yeah.
And it's
Laborious.
it's laborious, but I see the benefit of my friends doing it the other way. But it goes back to, I think, my insecurity of that's why I do the cross hatching anyway. Like that's how I enjoy it, but it's, in my mind, the cross hatching, more than most other kinds of drawing, shows best the entire history of the drawing from the beginning to the end. And so because you can see all the layers, but I'm so insecure about my drawing, and I know that I'm not as good of a drafts person, and so I overcompensate by, I spend all this time cross-hatching because you can hide mistakes, but then also, more importantly, even though I see all the mistakes when I'm looking at this right now, when I show it to somebody, it doesn't matter if they see the mistakes too, because I assume you all see the mistakes, right?
No, I see no mistakes. It's gorgeous.
But at least mentally in my head, like even if you do see the mistakes, you can at least still respect the amount of time put in the drawing. And so that's what with the cross hatching, if I overdo it, that's kind of, there's a mental game I play, that it's okay, the drawing might be horrible, but at least they can see this took a long time. So.
Oh my gosh, sweetheart. Okay, Sherry is asking, what size paper did you use for the original drawings of this book?
This drawing is probably, I should know these dimensions, but this was several years ago at this point, but I think it was probably about 25 inches by 16 inches high. So then that was reduced down 50% approximately for the final book size. So I typically will do my illustrations kind of 25 to 50% larger than they will end up being printed, because that also helps hide mistakes.
Yeah, that's funny. I don't mean to laugh, but
no, I think.
I just feel for you, because of course I think these are gorgeous, and just I'm like, oh, I'm envious of your talent. And so you're saying all this stuff about insecurity and covering up and all of that. It's just very sweet. So yeah. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Oh, next slide then. Okay, great. Oh, look at this one. This is the choose A Kafka Adventure. What is this?
So this is one of the other times I've done comics, but this was for an anthology that actually I think it's still coming out. It's supposed to come out this year, but I did this 4 or 5 years ago, and they have kept delaying it. But but they asked me to do it's one piece for this book that'll be all different collection of comic artists illustrating mystery and crime stories from literature. And so they asked me to illustrate Kafka's The Trial. And so within 15, they gave me 15 pages to do the whole book. And so the only way the best way I could come up with to make it work was to turn it into a choose your own adventure story, because not only could I condense it, or I could make it seem longer because of you'll cycle through pages, but it also, after I got thinking about it, it felt more Kafka-esque than any other way to do it. And so that ended up being a fun project. So that's, but that was in a different, I mean, I think this speaks more than anything to sometimes having the constraint of regardless of what the project is, the constraints are what push you to make something better or to make something. Because if they approached me and they wanted me to do a 100-page graphic, I never would have thought to do, choose your own adventure and because it's just the format itself is now a joke on.
Right. Yeah, and just the constriction and the parameters sort of guide that creativity.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
I like that. All right.
Next one. Then this is okay. Then this I just wanted to show a quick bit. This was from that nonfiction book where I did 45 spot illustrations in the cover throughout and this is a book about traveling around the world, investigating or looking at different customs around death care and how other cultures deal with it and kind of where to go from here. This author, Caitlin Doty, who I've worked with on a number of things, but she started a group called the Order of the Good Death probably 10 years ago, and she's a mortician and has a YouTube channel where she answers questions, but she's written about three excellent books now, and this is the second one that she had asked me to do illustrations for. But this is a very different kind of illustration for books in that I had it was a step removed from the graphic novel where I was intensely working with the author, kind of revising things and figuring out how to work things, whereas this is kind of written in a memoir-esque style, and so it was talking with her about which sections she wanted to do, and I would still do sketches or illustrations, but it was much more doing illustrations to prop up what she's saying as opposed to me inserting my own perspective into things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're a support system to her. Yeah, that's great.
Which is there's different great things about all the different kinds of illustrations, but in this one, in some sense, it's easier in that there's less mental work expected of me. She's describing what scene she wants me to illustrate from these travels, as opposed to me introducing themes for the book or something like that. But
yeah, that's great. And do you have more slides?
There are, but at this point you can if you want to just ask questions or move through. But then the last thing is there's maybe half a dozen illustrations from. This is one of my independent self-published book. This is the last self-published little book I did, which I put out last year. But this is just kind of for me, like, this is the most fun in book as far as book creation goes, because you're completely in control, and there's no constraint except from there's no approval for
it's you doing the thing. You're in control.
And so you can do something completely bizarre. If I ever tried to pitch something like this to an editor, like, there's no way that like this would go anywhere.
You'd be like, what are you talking about?
Right, exactly. So if you want to look at some of these, we can, or if you want to go, but this is basically this is a silent story or book. I mean, it's not even I think of it as a story, but it's more kind of like a series of nightmare vignettes. This is also was inspired by one of my favorite ever gory stories, which I can't pronounce the title because it's in French, but it's basically silent pages, and there's these ominous curtain tassels, like decorative Victorian curtain tassels that are hiding behind people and floating. And it's really, really creepy, but it's also really funny. So I've always loved that story, and so for fun, I wanted to try that. But I have an extensive pencil sharpener collection.
Yeah.
And so this was a way for me to kind of have fun with a hobby that I have. And
yeah, I love this. This is great. And these can be found on your website as well, or is this one not there yet?
It's on my website.
So let's just drop that into the chat. It's landisblair.org.
.com.
All right. Thank you for showing us these. That's
for your interest.
So yeah, we only have a few more minutes, but I do want to go ahead and let's cancel your spotlight real quick. So I do want to I want to thank you so much for coming. And I also want to plug the fact that you are working with Toya's writing. Toya's a guest on here who wrote a gorgeous, lovely story, Toya Wolf, who you know personally, but she wrote this gorgeous story for our verses and vignettes in November, and you are going to illustrate those. So for those of you who are on our Quarantour today who are not you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, please go to our website and do so you can see an exclusive Toya Wolf story illustrated by Landis Blair. It's only on our subscribers for the first month, and then it goes on to our website after that, but we kind of wait till like a few weeks later so that our newsletter subscribers get that joy first. And Toya is saying, so excited to see what Landis will dream up. So am I. It's going to be such a great thing. It's such an interesting combination of artists, writer artists doing this. I'm really excited that Ken suggested both of you. And then the second thing that I want to say to people is that next week we have so much stuff going on for our inaugural A House Haunted series that I want to actually have Todd talk really quickly in just a second about that, but I'm going to stop recording in just a second. But let's go ahead and say thank you, Landis, for coming. I appreciate it. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
But I just want to say thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for I'm so grateful that you asked me to do this. So.
It's such a delight to have you. Thank you. Okay. Hi again. Thank you so much for watching this week's Quarantour. We really appreciate your support. If you want to learn more about our guest from today, please read the description below. And if you'd like to support more programming like this, coming from Artist Bookhouse, please visit our website at artistbookhouse.org/donate. Thank you again for joining us.